Year of Yes by Shonda Rhimes. You never say yes to anything. Picture this. It's Thanksgiving morning, and you're standing in your sister's kitchen, completely wrapped up in your own narrative. The smell of roasting turkey fills the air while you're casually dropping names and describing all these glamorous invitations you've been getting. Speaking gigs, exclusive parties, meetings with actual royalty. You're doing that thing where you try to impress someone without looking like you're trying to impress them. You know? And then your older sister, the one whose opinion has mattered your entire life, doesn't even glance up from the cutting board. She just keeps chopping vegetables and says, in this quiet voice that somehow cuts through everything, "You never say yes to anything." 6 words. That's all it took to completely blow up Shonda Rhimes' carefully constructed world. Here's the thing about Shonda. By every visible measure, she had absolutely crushed it. We're talking about the creative genius behind Grey's Anatomy and Scandal, shows that became part of our cultural DNA. She had built an entire television empire and landed on practically every most powerful people in Hollywood list you can imagine. But behind all that success, she was hiding. This master storyteller had somehow written herself into the smallest possible corner. She'd become an introvert living in a fortress made entirely of the word no. No to interviews, no to parties, no to anything that made her stomach drop with fear. Her fictional worlds were these sprawling, vibrant universes, while her actual life had shrunk down to something quiet, predictable, and, if we're being honest, pretty miserable. This is the story of what happened when she decided to burn that fortress down. It's about a promise she made to herself. For 1 year she would say yes to everything that scared her. And honestly, Year of Yes is way more than just a memoir about a television producer stepping out of her comfort zone. It's a survival guide for anyone who's ever felt stuck, invisible, or like they're watching their own life from the sidelines. By the time we're done here, you'll understand just how much power lives inside that tiny 3-letter word. You'll see how saying yes can demolish the fears keeping you small, how it can transform your relationships with your work, your family, and, most importantly, with yourself. This isn't some fluffy story about forcing yourself to attend more networking events. This is about learning to actually show up for your own life. So get comfortable, and let's dive into the year that changed everything for one of television's most brilliant minds, and discover how it might just change things for you too. The story doesn't begin with some grand announcement or a perfectly timed New Year's resolution. It starts, like so many life-changing moments do, in the most ordinary place imaginable, a family kitchen on Thanksgiving morning. Shonda Rhimes was doing what she does best, telling a good story. She was rattling off this impressive list of invitations she'd received, fishing just a little for some admiration from her older sister, Dolores. But Dolores, focused on her vegetable prep, cut straight through the performance. "Are you going to do any of these things?" Shonda stumbles. "Well, no," she admits. "Obviously I said no, I'm busy." She gestures toward her kids, her 2 hit shows running simultaneously. She's a working single mother. She's basically Beyoncé, bringing home the bacon and frying it up. This isn't an excuse, it's just facts. She has every legitimate reason in the world to say no. The conversation continues with Shonda building her case, defending her fortress of refusals. But as she's heading upstairs later, Dolores mutters those 6 words, almost under her breath, "You never say yes to anything." The words just hang there in the air. For several weeks, they sit in Shonda's consciousness like an unexploded bomb. She goes back to her regular life, writing scripts, cuddling babies, maintaining her routine. She even attends the Kennedy Center Honors, where she somehow ends up sitting in the presidential box with President Obama and the First Lady. She's too shy to say much, but the evening is magical. Then one night, a few days before Christmas, the bomb finally goes off. She wakes up at 4 in the morning with this startling realization. If they had asked her beforehand to sit in that presidential box, she would have said no. She would have crafted some gracious, eloquent decline, because the thought of saying yes was simply too terrifying. This hits her like ice water to the face. She would have turned down one of the most memorable nights of her entire life. Why? Because she was scared. Scared of small talk, scared of being visible, scared of stepping outside the comfortable imaginary worlds she created for a living. She'd been a storyteller since childhood, building entire kingdoms out of canned goods in her family's pantry. That pantry was her safe space, a dark, warm world where she had total control. And sitting on her sofa, staring at the Christmas lights, she realizes that at 43 years old, she's still living in that pantry. Her wildly successful career has just become a bigger, fancier pantry, a place where she can create life without actually having to live it. And then another truth surfaces, this one more painful. I'm miserable. It's such a shameful thing to admit. How can she, with all her success and fortune, dare to be miserable? She thinks about Malala, about Anne Frank, people with actual problems. But the feeling is undeniable. That spark that once made her adventurous, that made her dance on tables, it's gone. Her life looks spectacular from the outside, but feels completely drained of color on the inside. She's become shut down, exhausted, and afraid of everything. Her sister's words echo back, "You never say yes to anything." She puts down her wine glass. Maybe it was time to start. The decision becomes official on her birthday, January 13th. She's got this nervous, hangover-type dread in her stomach, that feeling you get after making questionable life choices. She texts a close friend, "I'm going to say yes to anything and everything that scares me, for a whole year, or until I get scared to death and you have to bury me." Her logic is beautifully simple. Saying no has gotten her here. Here sucks. Saying yes might lead somewhere better, or at least somewhere different. And as a competitive, type A, workaholic control freak, once she commits to something, she follows through. This year of yes is now a binding contract with herself. The universe apparently loves a challenge. A week later, the president of Dartmouth College calls. He wants her to give the commencement speech, a 20-minute speech, in front of 10,000 people. The roar in her ears is deafening. The old Shonda would have crafted a beautiful, airtight no, but this is new Shonda. Year of yes, Shonda. Yes, she says, yes. She hangs up, files it away in her calendar, 6 months from now, practically forever away, and tries to forget about it. What she doesn't know yet is that the universe has a much more immediate test lined up. A test named Jimmy Kimmel. Here's something you might not know about Hollywood. It assumes everyone is dying for attention, that people would literally sit on a toilet on live TV for exposure. But for Shonda, public appearances were pure torture. They triggered a panic so complete it manifested physically, sweating, shaking, mumbling, her face freezing into this stern mask that made her look angry when she was actually just terrified. She even had to medicate herself with 2 glasses of wine before any public speaking event, just to function semi-normally. She calls it nature's beta blocker. Her interviews with Oprah, literally the pinnacle of validation, were complete blanks in her memory. Her mind, in its state of white-hot terror, simply refused to record those moments. All she remembers is her feet hurting in her first pair of Manolo Blahniks and flapping her arms like a baby chicken to air out her sweat-soaked dress while waiting for Oprah to arrive. So when her publicist Chris told her that Jimmy Kimmel Live wanted her as a guest, her answer was always a swift and definite no. But this time was different. It was for a 1-hour scandal special. It was important for the network, ABC, and she was right in the middle of contract negotiations. Chris knew he had her cornered. She screamed at him over the phone with this hysterical list of everything horrifying that could happen on live television. She could trip and crack her head open. She could sweat so much she'd literally faint. Or, worst of all, she could have what she calls fear snot, which is exactly what it sounds like, and exactly as horrifying as you're imagining. Chris listened patiently to all of this, and then he played his trump card. "Shonda, I thought you were saying yes to everything. Or was that just big talk?" Checkmate. She felt trapped. This yes didn't feel like Julie Andrews spinning on a mountaintop. It felt like her paw was caught in a steel trap. Her left eye started twitching uncontrollably. This was absolutely not what yes was supposed to feel like. The shift came, as it often did, through her work. She was on the set of Grey's Anatomy, watching Sandra Oh film one of Christina Yang's final scenes. In the scene, Christina's being offered her own hospital, the culmination of 10 seasons of brilliant, uncompromising work. It's her version of a fairy tale ending. Watching Christina, Shonda had this profound realization. Christina had learned not to compromise, not to settle, not to give up pieces of herself to make other people comfortable. She'd learned how to be her own sun. And in that moment, Shonda's eyes stopped twitching. She picked up the phone and called her publicist. "It can't be live," she said firmly. "I will do Jimmy Kimmel, but it can't be live." She was learning to keep her own pieces. She didn't want some pre-baked, already eaten brownie. She wanted the whole chocolate factory. A yes should feel like the sun. Somehow, Chris made it happen. The special, retitled Jimmy Kimmel Live, Behind the Scandalabra, was filmed on the Scandal set, not live. And Jimmy Kimmel was incredibly kind, basically carrying the entire interview and making it so she barely had to talk. He did all the work, she got all the credit. The next day, this gigantic vase of red roses arrived from Jimmy. The show had beaten The Tonight Show in the ratings for the first time ever. Chris was right. Jimmy was right, and her small compromise, her insistence on keeping her pieces, was also right. But the ratings weren't what mattered to her. What mattered was this: I did it. I said yes to something that terrified me, and I didn't die. A crack had appeared in the pantry door. Light was coming in, and she could feel warm sun on her face. If the Kimmel Experience cracked the pantry door open, the Dartmouth commencement speech was Shonda kicking that door completely off its hinges. As the date approached, she was paralyzed with terror that burned all creativity from her brain. The speech, she'd learned, would be filmed, streamed, tweeted, and dissected by NPR. The pressure was crushing. Less than 2 weeks before the event, she hadn't written a single word. She spent her days lying on her office floor, basically preparing for the apocalypse. She joined a private women's online network, and they rallied around her. They told her to power pose like Wonder Woman, standing with legs wide, chin up, hands on hips, which is scientifically proven to boost confidence. They also pointed out that the worst thing that could happen was crapping her pants on stage, and since that was unlikely, she'd probably be fine. Surprisingly, this actually helped. She started writing bits and pieces on scraps of paper, but the speech she eventually wrote was all athlete talk. her term for the bland, non-controversial, carefully neutral performance athletes give in post-game interviews. It was witty and smart, sure, but there was nothing of her in it. It was another magic trick, another way of speaking without actually being heard. On the plane to New Hampshire, she read it over and knew she couldn't deliver it. This speech wasn't a yes. She tucked it into a folder on her laptop labeled crap and started over. What she wrote next was raw, honest, and sometimes inappropriate. It was her. If she was going to say yes to this, she might as well say yes to being herself. The morning of graduation, she stood at her hotel window looking at the podium. She waited for that familiar tsunami of panic, but it never came. She was nervous, sure, but that was all. As she stepped up to the podium and looked out at that sea of graduating students, she didn't see a terrifying audience. She saw herself 20 years earlier, sitting in those same chairs, filled with the same uncertainty and fear. And in that moment of connection, her own fear just vanished. For the first time in her life, she stood on a stage and spoke as herself, and she felt joy. She told the graduates that dreams are for losers, that while dreamers are busy dreaming, the truly happy and successful people are busy doing. Ditch the dream, she said. Be a doer, not a dreamer. She confessed that her dream was to be Toni Morrison, the Nobel Prize-winning author. But since that job was already taken, she got busy becoming herself. And years later, when she actually had dinner with Toni Morrison, all the celebrated author wanted to talk about was Grey's Anatomy. She told them the real world can be hard, that they'd likely feel like losers for a while, but that they needed perspective and shouldn't be jerks. A hashtag is not a movement, she declared. A hashtag does not make you Dr. King. Devote a slice of your energies toward making the world suck less every week. And finally, she told them the truth about having it all. She confessed that whenever she's succeeding in one area of her life, she's almost certainly failing in another. If I am killing it on a scandal script, she admitted, I'm probably missing bath and story time at home. That is the trade-off. That is the deal you make. Anyone who tells you they are doing it all perfectly is a liar. The speech was a triumph, not because of what it did for the audience, but because of what it did for her. She'd taken off the armor, spoken her truth, and found that on the other side of her greatest fear wasn't death or humiliation, but freedom. This new freedom started rippling through every area of her life, forcing her to confront myths she'd internalized, especially one she calls the mommy war. Shonda has an amazing nanny named Jenny McCarthy. Yes, that's actually her real name. Jenny is, in Shonda's words, the SEAL Team 6 of nannies. For years, when reporters asked Shonda the big questions, how do you balance it all? What's your secret? She'd give evasive, athlete talk answers. I'm really organized. Or, I do laundry late at night. She never told the simple truth because she felt ashamed. She'd been taught that mothers are supposed to do it all themselves, that needing help equals failure. She compares this silence to her teenage obsession with Whitney Houston's hair. She spent years trying to replicate Whitney's flawless hairdo, feeling like a failure every single morning when she couldn't. It wasn't until years later that a hairdresser told her the truth. It was a wig. Not even Whitney's hair could look like that. If someone had just told her, she could have saved herself years of misery. Powerful women who stay silent about the help they have, the nannies, the housekeepers, the assistants, are letting everyone else believe the hair is real. They're making other women get out their curling irons for no reason. So Shonda started saying yes to telling the truth. The answer to the big questions is Jenny McCarthy. and she's proud to say she doesn't do it all alone. This honesty extended to the whole idea of motherhood itself. She recounts being at a school meeting where a perfect PTA mom announced that all bake sale items had to be homemade. Before she could stop herself, Shonda's voice boomed across the auditorium. "Are you freaking kidding me?" She explains that being a mother isn't a job. You can't quit being a mother. It's who you are. Calling it a job diminishes its profound, life-altering reality. Whether you work outside the home or stay at home, you're still a mother, and both choices deserve equal respect. The mommy war, she realizes, is a war she'd been fighting primarily against herself. By laying down her weapons and being honest about her reality, Costco brownies and all, she finds peace. There is, she discovers, victory in surrender. The year of yes was turning cocooned Shonda into a social butterfly. She was flying to New York, hosting charity events, being photographed by Annie Leibovitz. She was everywhere, it seemed, except at home. She started feeling irrelevant in her own house. Her children would give her this polite nod when she walked in, like she was a neighbor stopping by. The breaking point came one evening when she was dressed in a spectacular ball gown, about to leave for another event. Her toddler daughter, Emerson, came rushing toward her with sticky hands outstretched, asking, "Mama, wanna play?" In a split second that felt like slow motion, everything changed. She saw the back of her own head, constantly walking out the door. She saw her daughter changing right before her eyes, and she was missing it. So she kicked off her painful high heels, dropped to her knees on the floor, and said yes. Yes, I do. They played for 15 minutes. They read Everyone Poops. They had a disco dance party to Head, Shoulders, Knees, and Toes. It was just 15 minutes, but it was everything. This hot pearl of joy ignited in her chest. It wasn't some secret formula, she realized. It was just love. Something we all forget. From that night on, she made a rule for herself. Whenever her children asked her to play, the answer would always be yes, always. Unquestioningly. She discovered they usually only wanted to play for about 15 minutes anyway. 15 minutes of uninterrupted time. No phone, no email, no distractions. She could pull that off, even on her worst day. This simple rule forced her to confront a difficult truth. She was more comfortable on a soundstage than on a swing set. She had to learn how to play. Her nanny, Jenny McCarthy, became her quiet guide, teaching the stiff, introverted workaholic how to connect with her little extroverted children. While blowing bubbles in the backyard one day, a memory surfaced, like a painting hung back on the wall of her mind. She saw herself as a little girl, chasing fireflies with her sister Sandy. She remembered her mother laughing and saying, "You smell like puppies." She used to play. She'd just forgotten. This yes to play expanded outward. She started saying yes to other forms of self-care, manicures, long baths, browsing in a bookstore. Just 15 minutes of attention for herself. The more she played, the happier she was at work. The happier she was at work, the more relaxed she was at home. And the better she became at playing with her kids. It was this beautiful, virtuous cycle powered by love. There was another, larger reality Shonda had to confront, one that had been quietly shaping her life for years. At the start of her year of yes, she was fat. Not chubby or plus size. Obese. So heavy that she sometimes didn't recognize her own reflection. Her knees hurt, her joints ached, and she was on high blood pressure medication. This wasn't just about appearance. It was about how she felt. Her body wasn't a comfortable home for her brain anymore. The weight gain had happened gradually, coinciding with her retreat from the world. Success became cruel irony. The more shows she had, the more she sat at a desk or in an editing room. The pressure mounted, especially as what she calls a FOD, first, only. Different. She was one of the few black women running a television empire, and she felt the weight of that responsibility. She had to be twice as good to get half as much, and she wanted it all, so she worked 4 times as hard. Food became her magic. It numbed the stress, the fear, the exhaustion. Red wine, buttered popcorn, macaroni and cheese with bacon in it. They were a delicious spell to make the feelings disappear. Being fat worked for her. It was a security system, a way to become invisible, a container to carry her brain around in without anyone paying too much attention to the container. The moment of truth came on an airplane. The seatbelt in first class wouldn't buckle. She had 2 choices: ask the flight attendant for a seatbelt extender and face public humiliation, or fly without one and risk plummeting to her death, taking hundreds of innocent people with her. She chose death. She sat through the entire flight from New York unbuckled, a knot of shame and terror in her stomach. That was rock bottom. She knew something had to change. Lying in bed a few days later, she had a breakthrough. She realized that food was her magic, her way of putting a comforting layer on top of all the feelings she didn't want to deal with. But she was no longer okay with being dead inside. The year of yes had made her restless. Being numb no longer suited her. She decided to say yes to her health, but she did it with brutal honesty. She told herself, losing weight will bring you no joy. It will kick your butt and stomp you to the ground. Once she accepted that it was going to be awful, it became tolerable. She didn't follow a specific diet. She just ate less of everything. She moved more every day. She drank a ton of water. And most importantly, she started listening to her body, eating only when she was truly hungry and only what she was truly craving. The weight came off. Almost 100 pounds in the first year, and more after that. Her world began to change. She could gallop down a hallway with her kids on her back and not be winded. She started caring about clothes. But the biggest change was internal. The fat had been armor, a way to hide. Now she was getting comfortable being seen. She was realizing that part of her wanted to be seen, and that it was okay. One of the hardest yeses for Shonda was learning to accept a compliment. At a dinner celebrating women in television, she watched as one powerful, accomplished woman after another deflected praise. They'd shake their heads, duck or laugh with embarrassment, as if being told you're awesome was somehow tragic. Shonda realized she did the same thing. She couldn't handle it either. What, she wondered, was wrong with them? With her? She decided to yes it. For the rest of the year, whenever someone gave her a compliment, she would simply say, "Thank you," smile, and shut up. No apologies, no deflections, no "I'm just so lucky" speeches. She explains that lucky is a word she hates. Lucky implies I didn't do anything, she says. Lucky implies something was given to me that I didn't earn. Don't call me lucky, call me a badass. This practice of accepting praise is part of a larger goal, the pursuit of badassery. Badassery, she defines, is the practice of knowing, accepting, and celebrating your own accomplishments and gifts. It's living life with swagger. It's what Serena Williams does when she walks onto a tennis court. She doesn't apologize for being the best. Shonda realizes that for years, she'd been hiding her light, making herself smaller, so others wouldn't feel uncomfortable. It was a habit she learned as a nerdy, shy, chubby kid. But it was making her miserable. The ultimate test of her newfound badassery comes when Mindy Kaling asks her to do a cameo on the Mindy Project. The idea of acting, of being seen in this way, is terrifying, but she says yes. And when the episode airs, she does the boldest thing of all. She watches it in real time. She looks at herself on screen and thinks, not bad. Actually kind of amazing and credible, words her young daughters made up. She's learning to own her marvelousness, to stop apologizing for it. She's learning to swagger. The year of yes was about saying yes to opportunities, but Shonda soon discovered its most powerful application was saying yes to herself. And sometimes, saying yes to yourself means saying no to other people. No is a word she'd always struggled with in her personal life. At work, she was a gladiator, fearless in defending her creative vision. But in her private life, she was a people pleaser, terrified of conflict. The moment her shows became successful, people came out of nowhere asking for jobs, money, and favors. And she found it nearly impossible to say no. The climax of this struggle came when a friend, let's call her Laura, asked for a very large sum of money. The amount was staggering, and the request was casual. Shonda was paralyzed with anxiety. Her closest friends told her no is a complete sentence. She decided to try it. When she told Laura no, the reaction was immediate and ugly. Laura became angry, resentful, and accusatory, and in that moment, Shonda felt a surprising sense of peace. The worst thing she'd feared was happening, and it wasn't so awful. Saying no allowed Laura to reveal her true character. This experience unlocked a new superpower, the willingness to have difficult conversations. She realized that on the other side of a hard conversation lies freedom. It clears the air, reveals character, and resolves misunderstandings. The more she was willing to have these conversations, the more she was willing to say no to people who left her feeling emptier and unhappier. This led to the most difficult no of all. Throughout the year of yes, Shonda was in a serious relationship with a great guy. They were, in fact, engaged to be married. But she had a secret she was keeping, even from herself. She didn't want to get married. She loved weddings, the dresses, the flowers, the vows. She adored them all, but she'd never, ever dreamed of being a bride herself. Growing up, she played with a Barbie named Kara, who was a spy, a congresswoman, and a world-famous surgeon. Kara never dated Ken. Instead, she popped his head off and used his hollow skull to store her shoes. Shonda's own parents had the perfect marriage, a 50-year love affair that made it look effortless and joyful. But she knew she wasn't built for it. The idea of sharing her space, of having someone in her mental pantry while she was writing, felt like a cage. For a long time, she tried to convince herself otherwise. She was laying track for a ghost train, building a story of a traditional future that wasn't hers. But the year of yes demanded honesty. She finally had the difficult conversation. She told him, "I do not want to get married." The relationship ended. And to her own surprise, Shonda didn't feel devastated. She danced. She literally danced it out in her living room, happier and lighter than she'd been in a long time. Her sister Dolores was confused. "So," she said slowly, "you are this happy because you said yes to not getting married?" "Yes," Shonda exclaimed. "I said yes to me." This was the ultimate lesson. Happiness doesn't come from following a prescribed list of rules. It comes from living as you need to, from being who you actually are instead of who you think you're supposed to be. Her happy ending wasn't the same as everyone else's. And that was more than okay. The rule is, there are no rules. The journey culminates in a photo shoot for the cover of Entertainment Weekly. Shonda standing on an Apple box, feeling the warmth of the lights, with Beyoncé blaring from the speakers. She's surrounded by the leading ladies of her Thursday night empire: Ellen Pompeo, Kerry Washington, and Viola Davis. A year and a half ago, the idea of this would have been her worst nightmare. But now, she's dancing. The photographer, James White, shouts at her over the music, "You are beautiful." He says it like it's obvious, and in that moment, Shonda decides to believe him. "Yes," she whispers to herself, "I am beautiful." The pantry door is wide open. The paintings on the walls of her mind are vibrant and new. The year of yes was supposed to end, but she realizes it can't. Saying yes isn't just life-changing, it's life-saving. It's a continuous climb up the mountain, seeking the next view, breathing that rare air, and always, always dancing in the sun. What strikes me most about Year of Yes is its profound, almost deceptive simplicity. The premise is so straightforward. Say yes to things that scare you, that you could easily mistake it for some simple self-help gimmick. But what Shonda Rhimes reveals is that this simple act is actually a key that unlocks every room in your life that you've sealed shut out of fear. This isn't a book about becoming an extrovert or filling up your calendar. It's a book about authenticity. Shonda's journey is this powerful reminder that so many of us build lives that look amazing on paper but don't feel good to actually live. We say no to opportunities, not because we're genuinely busy, but because we're afraid of being seen, of failing, of not being perfect. We stay in our pantry, where it's safe and controlled, but where nothing new or joyful can ever get in. One of the most powerful lessons for me is the paradox at the heart of the book. The year of saying yes is ultimately what teaches her how and when to say no. By saying yes to public speaking, she finds her public voice. By saying yes to playing with her kids, she redefines her priorities. By saying yes to difficult conversations, she learns to set boundaries. Each yes to the world is ultimately a yes to herself, and that newfound self-worth gives her the strength to say no to anything or anyone that diminishes her. This is an essential lesson for anyone, but especially for young people standing on the threshold of adulthood. The world will present you with 1,000 different blueprints for what your life should look like. It'll tell you what success is, what love is, what happiness is. Shonda's story is a declaration of independence from those external blueprints. It's a call to listen to that quiet inner voice, and to have the courage to build a life that fits you, even if it looks different from everyone else's. So how can you start your own year of yes right now? First, identify one small thing that makes you nervous. Not terrified, just nervous. Maybe it's raising your hand in class, introducing yourself to someone new, or trying an activity you're sure you'll be terrible at. Just for today, say yes to it. See what happens. The goal isn't success. It's the experience of moving through fear. Second, practice accepting a compliment. The next time someone says something nice about you, your work, your clothes, your ideas, resist the urge to say, "Oh, it was nothing." Take a breath, look them in the eye, and say thank you. Feel the weight of that acknowledgement without deflecting it. It's a small but powerful way to start owning your own value. And finally, say yes to 15 minutes of play. Put your phone away, turn off the TV, and do something just because it brings you joy. It could be listening to music, kicking a ball around, drawing, or just lying in the grass watching the clouds. Reconnect with that part of you that doesn't need to be productive, just present. We've journeyed through the heart of Shonda's year, but a map is never the same as the territory. The real transformation, the feeling of standing in your own sun, comes from walking the path yourself. A summary can show you the highlights, but the book itself allows you to feel the fear, the struggle, and the ultimate triumph in a much deeper way. If any part of Shonda's story has sparked something in you, I encourage you to pick up a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning a new idea. It's an experience that can genuinely change the way you see the possibilities in your own life. You can find a link to the book in the description below. Also, if this story resonated with you, I'd be honored if you'd join our community of curious minds by liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Together, we'll continue unlocking the wisdom hidden on the bookshelves of the world's most incredible thinkers. Let's keep growing together.